The millionaire froze in shock as he saw his beloved, missing for 7 years, begging on the streets with twin daughters. What seemed like an unexpected reunion quickly turns into a nightmare full of secrets that threaten his life. Liam stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, his piercing gaze fixed on the bustling Los Angeles skyline. At 35, he was the epitome of success, a self-made millionaire with a business empire that spanned continents. Yet, as he absently swirled the untouched whiskey in his crystal tumbler, the emptiness in his eyes betrayed a man haunted by ghosts of the past. 7 years. It had been 7 long years since Livia had vanished without a trace, leaving a void in Kawa's life that no amount of success could fill. The memory of her laugh, the warmth of her touch, these were the treasures he clung to in the quiet moments between board meetings and business deals. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his reverie. Mr. Mendez, his assistant Clara, poked her head in. "The board is waiting for you in the conference room." Kawa nodded, setting down his glass and straightening his impeccable suit. "Thank you, Clara. I'll be right there." As she retreated, he took a deep breath, donning the mask of the confident, unflappable CEO that the world had come to expect. The meeting dragged on, filled with profit projections and expansion plans. Kawa played his part perfectly, asking insightful questions and making decisive calls. But beneath the surface, his mind wandered to the same questions that had plagued him for years. What had happened to Livia? Why had she left? Was she safe? Happy? These thoughts consumed him, even as he navigated the cutthroat world of international business with apparent ease. As the meeting concluded, Kawa's uncle Evaristo approached him, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Excellent presentation, nephew. Your father would be proud." Kawa managed a tight smile. Evaristo had been a constant presence in the family business since Kawa's father passed away, always ready with advice and connections. Yet something about his uncle's demeanor had always set Kawa on edge. "Thank you, uncle. Your input was invaluable as always." Evaristo clapped him on the shoulder, his grip just a touch too firm. "Family first, my boy. Always remember that." With a knowing wink, he sauntered off, leaving Kawa with an inexplicable sense of unease. Later that evening, Kawa found himself wandering the streets of São Paulo, seeking solace in the anonymity of the crowd. He had shed his tailored suit for jeans and a simple button-down, blending in with the throngs of people, enjoying the balmy night air. It was on nights like these, when the weight of his carefully constructed life felt suffocating, that he allowed himself to remember Livia most vividly. He could almost see her walking beside him, her dark curls bouncing with each step, her eyes alight with mischief and love. They had met in college, he, the ambitious business major, and she, the free-spirited art student. Against all odds, they had fallen deeply in love, their differences complementing each other perfectly. Livia had taught Kawa to see beauty in the smallest details of life, while he had shown her the power of dreaming big. Lost in thought, Kawa barely registered the commotion ahead until he was in the middle of it. A small crowd had gathered around a woman huddled on the sidewalk, 2 small children clinging to her sides. The woman's clothes were tattered, her face hidden beneath a curtain of tangled hair. "Please," she was saying, her voice hoarse. "Any help you can spare. For my daughters." Something about her voice sent a jolt through Kawa's body. He pushed forward gently, murmuring apologies as he made his way to the front of the crowd. The woman looked up, probably hoping for a kind donation. Time seemed to stop. Beneath the dirt and despair, Kawa saw a face he had dreamed of for 7 long years. Older now, marked by hardship, but unmistakable. "Livia," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise of the street. Livia's eyes widened in recognition and fear. In an instant, she was on her feet, gathering the 2 little girls in her arms. "We have to go," she said urgently to the children, who looked confused and frightened. "Livia, wait," Kawa called out, his mind reeling. He reached out, managing to catch her arm gently. "Please don't run. Let me help you." She whirled to face him, her eyes wild with a mix of emotions, fear, desperation, and something deeper that Kawa couldn't quite name. "You can't," she hissed. "You don't understand, we're in danger." The girls, who looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, clung to Livia's legs, staring up at Kawa with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. It was then that Kawa noticed their eyes, a striking shade of green that mirrored his own. The realization hit him like a physical blow. These weren't just any children. They were his children, his daughters. "Livia," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Whatever's happening, whatever danger you're in, let me help. Please. I have resources, security. I can protect you. All of you." For a moment, Livia seemed to waver. The years of hardship were etched into every line of her face, and Kawa could see the exhaustion weighing heavily on her shoulders. But then she shook her head. "You don't know what you're getting into, Kawa. It's better if you just forget you saw us." "I can't do that," Kawa insisted, his heart racing. "I've spent 7 years wondering what happened to you, and now I find out I have daughters. Please, Livia, at least let me take you somewhere safe for the night. We can figure things out in the morning." Livia glanced around nervously, as if expecting danger to materialize from the shadows at any moment. The girls huddled closer to her, sensing her distress. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. "One night," she conceded. "But you have to promise me, Kawa. Promise me you won't ask questions. Not tonight." Kawa nodded solemnly. "I promise. Come on, my car's not far from here." As they walked, Kawa couldn't help but steal glances at the little girls. Twins, he realized, noticing their identical features. They were beautiful, with Livia's delicate nose and his own green eyes. His daughters. The thought sent a rush of emotions through him. Joy, confusion, anger at the lost years, and a fierce protectiveness he had never experienced before. They reached his sleek black sedan, and Kawa helped Livia and the girls into the back seat. As he slid behind the wheel, he caught Livia's eye in the rearview mirror. The fear was still there, but beneath it, he saw a flicker of something else. Hope, perhaps, or the faintest glimmer of the love they had once shared. As Kawa navigated the car through the nighttime streets of São Paulo, his mind raced with questions. What had happened to drive Livia to the streets? What danger could be so great that she would choose a life of hardship over reaching out to him? And how would he protect them now that he had found them? One thing was certain. Kawa Mendes's life had just changed irrevocably. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his heart over the past 7 years were crumbling, and in their place, a fierce determination was taking root. He would protect Livia and their daughters no matter the cost. The past 7 years of emptiness and questions were over. A new chapter was beginning, and Kawa was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the city lights streaked by outside the car windows, Kawa made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, heal the wounds of the past, and build the future that had been stolen from them all those years ago. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in 7 years, Kawa felt truly alive. The elevator ride to Kawa's penthouse was thick with tension. Livia stood rigid, her arms wrapped protectively around the girls, while Kawa tried to process the whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. As the doors slid open, revealing the opulent interior of his home, he saw Livia's eyes widen in a mixture of awe and discomfort. "You can use the guest rooms," Kawa said softly, leading them down a hallway. "There's a bathroom attached, and I'll find some clean clothes for all of you." Livia nodded, her gaze darting nervously around the space. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. As Kawa rummaged through his closets, searching for something that might fit Livia and the girls, he could hear hushed voices from the guest room. The girls' high-pitched whispers were punctuated by Livia's soothing tones, though he couldn't make out the words. It struck him then how little he knew about his own daughters. Their names, their personalities, their likes and dislikes, all of it was a mystery to him. When he returned with an armful of clothes, he found Livia perched on the edge of the bed, the girls curled up on either side of her. They had fallen asleep, their small faces peaceful in slumber. Livia looked up as he entered, and for a moment Kawan saw a flicker of the woman he had loved. Vulnerable, beautiful, and fiercely protective. "I brought some clothes," he said, setting the pile on a nearby chair. "They might be a bit big, but they're clean. There are towels in the bathroom, and I can order some food if you're hungry." Livia shook her head. "We're fine for now." "Thank you, Kawa." She paused, her fingers absently stroking one of the girls' hair. "Their names are Bianca and Lorena. They're 6 years old." Kawa's heart clenched. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "They have your smile." A ghost of a smile flitted across Livia's face. "And your eyes," she added. Then, as if catching herself, she straightened up, her expression guarded once more. "We should get some rest. We'll be out of your hair in the morning." "Livia," Kawan started, taking a step forward. "You don't have to leave. Whatever's going on, whatever danger you're in, let me help. Please." For a moment, Livia's resolve seemed to waver. She looked down at the sleeping girls, then back at Kawan, conflict evident in her eyes. "It's not that simple," she said finally. "There are things you don't understand, things I can't explain." "Then help me understand," Kawan pleaded. 7 years, Livia. 7 years I've wondered what happened to you, and now I find out I have daughters. Don't I deserve some answers?" Livia's eyes flashed with a mix of pain and anger. "Deserve?" she hissed, careful not to wake the girls. "How you have no idea what I've been through, what I've had to do to keep them safe. You think your money and your resources can fix everything, but you're wrong. Some things can't be fixed, Kawan." Her words hit him like a physical blow. Kawan took a step back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "You're right. I don't know what you've been through. But I want to. I want to help, Livia. Not because I think I can fix everything, but because I never stopped loving you." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with years of unspoken emotions. Livia's expression softened slightly, but the wariness remained in her eyes. "Love isn't always enough," she said softly. "Sometimes it's not even safe." Before Kawan could respond, a small voice piped up from the bed. "Mama, where are we?" Livia turned her attention to the little girl, Bianca or Lorena. Kawan wasn't sure which, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart," Livia soothed. "We're somewhere safe for tonight. Go back to sleep." The girl's gaze shifted to Kawan, her green eyes so like his own, wide with curiosity. "Who's that man, Mama?" Livia hesitated, glancing at Kawan. He held his breath, unsure of what she would say. Finally, Livia spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "This is Kawan. He's an old friend who's helping us out. Now back to sleep, okay?" The girl nodded, snuggling back down next to her sister. Kawan felt a pang in his chest at being introduced merely as an old friend, but he understood Livia's caution. Whatever had driven her away 7 years ago, whatever danger still lurked in the shadows, it was clear that protecting the girls was Livia's top priority. "I should go," Kawan said quietly. "I'll let you all get some rest. But Livia, we need to talk. Tomorrow, please, I'll respect your privacy, but I need to know what's going on. If only so I can help keep you safe." Livia studied him for a long moment, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Tomorrow," she agreed. "But Kawan, be careful. The less you know, the safer you are." With that cryptic warning, she turned away, effectively dismissing him. Kawan retreated from the room, his mind whirling with questions and possibilities. As he made his way to his own bedroom, he pulled out his phone, firing off a quick text to his head of security. He needed to increase the protection around the penthouse, discreetly. Whatever threat Livia was running from, Kawan was determined to keep her and the girls safe. Sleep eluded Kawan that night. He tossed and turned, his dreams a chaotic mix of memories and imagined scenarios. Livia's laugh echoing through a sun-drenched park. The girls, his daughters, running towards him with open arms. And always lurking at the edges, a nameless, faceless threat that sent him jolting awake in a cold sweat. As dawn broke over São Paulo, Kawan found himself in his home office, poring over old files and photographs. He had never completely given up searching for Livia, but over the years the trail had gone cold. Now with renewed determination, he combed through every scrap of information, looking for clues he might have missed. A soft knock at the door startled him. He looked up to see Livia standing in the doorway, wearing one of his old t-shirts and a pair of sweatpants that were far too big for her slight frame. Despite the ill-fitting clothes and the dark circles under her eyes, she was still breathtakingly beautiful to him. "The girls are still asleep," she said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "I thought, maybe we could talk." Kawan nodded, gesturing for her to come in. As Livia settled into a chair across from him, he noticed her gaze lingering on the scattered papers and photos on his desk. "You've been looking for me," she said softly, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Every day for 7 years, Kawan admitted. "Livia, what happened? One day we were planning our future, and the next, You were just gone. No note, no explanation. I feared the worst. Livia's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. I didn't have a choice, Kawa. There were threats. Dangerous people who would have hurt you, hurt the girls if I had stayed. What kind of threats? Kawa pressed gently. Who would want to hurt you? Livia shook her head, fear evident in her eyes. I can't. It's not safe for you to know. Please, Kawa. Just know that I left to protect you, to protect our daughters. I never stopped loving you, but I had to stay away. Kawa leaned forward, his eyes intense. Livia, whatever it is, whoever is threatening you, we can face it together. I have resources, connections. We can keep you and the girls safe. Livia stood abruptly, pacing the room. You don't understand, Kawa. These people, they're powerful, connected. They have eyes and ears everywhere. Just by being here, I'm putting you in danger. Then help me understand, Kawa pleaded. Give me something, anything, so I can start to unravel this. Please, Livia. I've lost 7 years with you, with our daughters. I can't lose you again. Livia paused by the window, her reflection ghostly in the early morning light. For a long moment she was silent, and Kawa could almost see the internal battle raging within her. Finally she turned to face him. There's a document, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something I discovered by accident 7 years ago. It exposes terrible things, corruption at the highest levels. If it ever came to light, it would destroy some very powerful people. Kawa's mind raced. Is that why you ran? To protect this document? Livia nodded. They threatened to hurt you, to hurt the girls if I didn't hand it over. But I couldn't. The things in that document, Kawa, they're evil. I couldn't let them get away with it. So I ran, hid the document and tried to disappear. Where is it now? Kawa asked, already formulating plans in his mind. Safe, Livia replied. Hidden where they'll never find it. But Kawa, you have to understand. As long as that document exists, as long as I'm alive, they'll never stop hunting me. Kawa stood, crossing the room to stand before Livia. Gently, he took her hands in his. Then we'll face them together. Livia, I'm not letting you disappear again. Whatever this is, whatever we're up against, we'll find a way to expose the truth and keep our family safe. Tears spilled down Livia's cheeks. Our family, she repeated softly. Kawa, there's so much you don't know. So much I've done to survive, to keep the girls safe. How can you still want to help me after everything? Kawa cupped her face gently, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. Because I love you, he said simply. I've loved you for the past 7 years, even when I didn't know where you were or if I'd ever see you again. And now that I know about Bianca and Lorena, Livia, you've given me the greatest gift imaginable. Let me help you. Let me be the father our daughters deserve. Livia leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. For a moment they stood there in silence, the weight of 7 years of separation and secrets hanging between them. Then, from down the hall, came the sound of little voices. Mama? Mama, where are you? Livia's eyes snapped open, the vulnerability of the moment replaced by the fierce protectiveness Kawa had seen the night before. We should check on them, she said, pulling away slightly. Kawa nodded, letting his hands fall to his sides. Of course, and Livia, thank you for trusting me with this much. I promise you we'll figure this out. Together. As they made their way to the guest room, Kawa's mind was already working overtime. He had connections, resources that could help unravel this mystery. But first, he needed to ensure Livia and the girls were safe. And for that, he might need to call in some favors from people he'd rather avoid. The image of his Uncle Evaristo flashed in his mind, and with it came an inexplicable sense of unease. Kawa pushed the thought aside. Right now, his priority was his newfound family. The rest could wait. Little did he know, the web of secrets and lies surrounding Livia's disappearance was far more tangled and far closer to home than he could have ever imagined. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity and emotion for Kawa. He threw himself into creating a safe haven for Livia and the girls, all while trying to maintain the facade of normalcy at work. It was a delicate balancing act, one that left him exhausted but more alive than he'd felt in years. Bianca and Lorena, initially shy and wary, were slowly warming up to him. Their innocent questions and curious glances tugged at Kawa's heart, reminding him of all the moments he'd missed. He found himself marveling at their differences. Bianca, the more outspoken of the two, with a mischievous glint in her eye that reminded him of Livia, and Lorena, quieter but observant, often lost in her own world of imagination. One evening, as Kawa returned home from a particularly grueling board meeting, he found the penthouse filled with the sound of laughter. Following the noise, he discovered Livia and the girls in the kitchen, flour dusting their clothes and faces as they attempted to make pizza. "Papa!" Bianca called out, the word still new and precious to Kawa's ears. "Come help us. Mama says you make the best pizza dough." Kawa's eyes met Livia's over the children's heads, a silent exchange passing between them. They hadn't told the girls the full truth yet, but they knew Kawa was their father. It was a start. "Is that so?" Kawa grinned, rolling up his sleeves. "Well, we can't disappoint then, can we?" As they worked together, kneading dough and choosing toppings, Kawa felt a warmth spreading through his chest. This was what he had always wanted: a family, laughter, the simple joy of making dinner together. But even as he savored the moment, he couldn't shake the underlying tension. The constant security presence outside, the encrypted phones he'd provided for Livia, the way her eyes still darted to the windows at unexpected sounds, all reminders that their happiness was built on fragile ground. Later that night, after the girls had been tucked in, Kawa found Livia on the balcony, staring out at the twinkling lights of São Paulo. He joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "They're amazing, you know," he said softly. "You've done an incredible job with them, Livia, under impossible circumstances." Livia took a sip of wine, a sad smile playing on her lips. "They're survivors, like their father." Kawa turned to face her, leaning against the railing. "Have you given any more thought to what I suggested?" "About coming forward with the document?" Livia tensed, her knuckles whitening around the stem of her glass. "It's not that simple, Kawa. The people involved, they're not just criminals. They're pillars of society, business leaders, politicians. If this comes out, it won't just be my life at risk. It could destabilize the entire country." "But if it's as bad as you say, doesn't the truth need to come out?" Kawa pressed gently. "We could take it to the federal police or even international authorities. There must be someone we can trust." Livia shook her head, frustration evident in her voice. "You don't understand. These people, they have connections everywhere. The last person I tried to trust with this information, they disappeared. That's when I knew I had to run." Kawa's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information Livia had shared over the past few days. This person who disappeared, who were they? Livia hesitated, conflict clear in her eyes. Finally, she sighed. He was a journalist, Renato Silva. He had been investigating corruption in the business world, and I thought he could help expose the truth safely, but they got to him before he could publish anything. The name struck a chord in Kawa's memory. Renato Silva. I remember that case. It was all over the news a few years ago. They never found him, did they? Livia shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "No. And it's my fault. If I hadn't gone to him." Kawa pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she trembled. "It's not your fault, Livia. You were trying to do the right thing. We'll find a way to make this right, I promise." As he held her, Kawa's mind was already formulating plans. He had connections of his own, people he trusted. Perhaps it was time to start making some discreet inquiries. But he'd have to be careful. If Livia was right about the reach of these people, one wrong move could put them all in danger. The next morning, Kawa made a series of calls from his secure line, reaching out to old contacts in law enforcement and journalism. He was careful, never revealing too much, but asking questions about cold cases, about Renato Silva, about rumors of high-level corruption. It was after one such call that Kawa's office door opened, revealing his uncle Evaristo. Kawa quickly ended the call, an inexplicable sense of unease creeping over him. "Uncle," he greeted, forcing a smile. "I didn't realize we had a meeting scheduled." Evaristo's eyes crinkled with his trademark charm, but there was something calculating in his gaze. "No meeting, nephew. Just thought I'd check in. You've seemed distracted lately. Anything I should know about?" Kawa's instincts screamed at him to be cautious. "Just some personal matters," he said smoothly. "Nothing that will affect the business, I assure you." Evaristo nodded, but Kawa could see he wasn't entirely convinced. "Family is important, Kawa, but so is the legacy we've built. I hope you remember that. As Evaristo left, Kawa couldn't shake the feeling that his uncle's words held a deeper meaning. For the first time, he found himself wondering just how much Evaristo knew about Livia's disappearance, about the document she protected. That evening, as Kawa played with the girls in the living room, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. His blood ran cold as he read the words on the screen. "Be careful who you trust, Kawa. Not all family has your best interests at heart. If you want to protect Livia and the girls, meet me tomorrow at noon. Come alone." The message was followed by an address, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Kawa's mind raced. Was this a trap, or could it be the break they needed? As Bianca climbed into his lap, chattering excitedly about her day, Kawa made his decision. He would go to the meeting, but not before putting safeguards in place. Whatever secrets were lurking in the shadows, whatever danger threatened his family, Kawa was determined to face it head-on. Little did he know, the revelations awaiting him would shake the very foundations of everything he thought he knew about his family, his business, and himself. The abandoned warehouse loomed before Kawa, its rusted metal exterior a stark contrast to the sleek skyscrapers of São Paulo's business district. He checked his watch, 11:55 a.m. He was early, but that was intentional. Kawa had always believed in controlling the situation, and today was no different. Before leaving the penthouse, he had kissed Livia and the girls goodbye, trying to hide the tension in his shoulders. He had told Livia he had a business meeting, hating the lie, but knowing it was necessary. The less she knew, the safer she would be. As a precaution, Kawan had activated the GPS tracker in his watch and left detailed instructions with his most trusted security officer. If he didn't check in every hour, they were to track his location and send help immediately. Taking a deep breath, Kawa stepped out of his car and approached the warehouse. The heavy metal door creaked as he pushed it open, the sound echoing ominously in the cavernous space. Shafts of sunlight filtered through broken windows, illuminating swirling dust motes and creating eerie shadows. "Hello?" Kawa called out, his voice reverberating off the bare walls. "I'm here as requested." For a moment there was only silence. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the warehouse, a figure emerged. As it stepped into the light, Kawa's breath caught in his throat. It was a face he knew well, one he had trusted implicitly for years. "Clara?" he gasped, recognizing his longtime assistant. "What? What are you doing here?" Clara's face was grim, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a seriousness Kawa had never seen before. "I'm sorry for the secrecy, Mr. Mendes," she said, her voice low and urgent, "but I couldn't risk anyone overhearing us at the office." Kawa's mind raced. Clara had been with him for years, managing his schedule, handling sensitive documents. She knew almost everything about his business dealings. But this was something else entirely. "Clara, what's going on?" Kawa demanded, taking a step closer. "Are you involved in all of this somehow?" Clara shook her head, her eyes darting nervously to the shadows behind her. "Not involved, Mr. Mendes, at least not willingly, but I've seen things, heard things. Things that I think are connected to what happened to Ms. Livia all those years ago." Kawa's heart raced. "What do you mean? What have you seen?" Clara took a deep breath, steeling herself. "It started about 6 months after Ms. Livia disappeared. I noticed Mr. Evaristo having hushed conversations, making calls from burner phones. At first I thought it was just business, maybe some under-the-table deals, but then..." She paused, glancing over her shoulder again before continuing in a whisper. "I overheard him talking about a document, something that could bring it all crashing down if it ever came to light. He seemed scared, Mr. Mendes. I've never seen him like that before." Kawa's blood ran cold. The document Livia had mentioned, could it be the same one? And if Evaristo knew about it, how deeply was he involved in all of this? "Clara," Kawa said, his voice low and urgent, "what you're saying, it's dangerous information. Are you sure about this?" Clara nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sure, Mr. Mendes. And there's more. Last week, I saw Mr. Evaristo meeting with someone in a parking garage. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw money change hands, a lot of money. And the man, he looked like the type you don't want to cross, if you know what I mean." Kawa's mind was reeling. His uncle, the man he had trusted with so much of his business, potentially involved in something so sinister. It was almost too much to comprehend. "Why are you telling me this now, Clara?" Kawa asked, studying her face carefully. Clara's lower lip trembled. Because I'm scared, Mr. Mendes. I think they know I've seen too much. Yesterday I found a note on my car. It said they knew where my family lived, that I should keep my mouth shut if I wanted them to stay safe. Kawa felt a surge of protective anger. Clara had been loyal to him for years, and now she was caught in the crossfire of something she didn't even understand. I'll protect you, Clara, he said firmly. You and your family. We'll figure this out together. Just then, a loud clang echoed through the warehouse. Clara's eyes widened in fear. Someone's here, she whispered. We need to go. Now. Kawa nodded, grabbing Clara's arm and leading her towards a side exit. As they slipped out into the bright sunlight, Kawa's mind was racing. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was more dangerous and complex than he had ever imagined. As they hurried to Kawa's car, he made a decision. It was time to confront Evaristo directly. But first, he needed to ensure Livia and the girls were safe. Whatever storm was coming, Kawa was determined to protect the people he loved, no matter the cost. Little did he know, the revelations of the day were only the beginning. The web of lies and deceit surrounding his family and his business ran deeper than he could have ever imagined, and unraveling it would test his resolve, his relationships, and his very sense of self in ways he never thought possible. Kawa's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions as he sped back to the penthouse, Clara in the passenger seat beside him. The revelations of the past hour had shaken him to his core, forcing him to question everything he thought he knew about his family and his business. As they pulled into the underground parking garage of his building, Kawa turned to Clara. I need you to lay low for a while, he said, his voice low and urgent. Go home. Pack a bag for you and your family. I'll have my security team move you to a safe location until we figure this out. Clara nodded, her face pale but determined. Thank you, Mr. Mendes. I'm sorry for bringing all of this to your doorstep. Kawa shook his head. You did the right thing, Clara. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise. After ensuring Clara was safely on her way, Kawa took the private elevator to his penthouse. As the doors slid open, he was greeted by the sound of children's laughter, a sound that just days ago would have been foreign in his home, but now filled him with a sense of purpose and determination. He found Livia and the girls in the living room, surrounded by art supplies. Bianca was proudly holding up a colorful drawing, while Lorena was concentrating intently on what looked like an origami creation. Papa! Bianca exclaimed, running to him with her drawing. Look what I made! It's all of us. Kawa felt his heart constrict as he looked at the crayon figures on the paper, stick figures representing him, Livia, Bianca, and Lorena, all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. It was a picture of the family he had always dreamed of, now threatened by shadows from the past. It's beautiful, sweetheart, he said, forcing a smile. He met Livia's eyes over Bianca's head, seeing the concern there. She could tell something was wrong. Girls, Livia said, her voice gentle but firm, why don't you go wash up for dinner? I need to talk to your father for a moment. As soon as the girls were out of earshot, Livia turned to Kawa. What happened? She asked, her voice low and urgent. You look like you've seen a ghost. Kawa sank onto the couch, suddenly feeling the weight of the day's revelations. Livia, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I think I know who might be involved in all of this, and it's closer to home than I ever imagined. He recounted his meeting with Clara, watching as Livia's face paled with each new detail. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment, her hands twisting in her lap. Your uncle, she finally said, her voice shaking slightly. I should have known. Kawa, if Evaristo is involved in this, we're in even more danger than I thought. Kawa leaned forward, taking Livia's hands in his. We'll figure this out, Livia, I promise you. But first we need to make sure you and the girls are safe. I think it's time we got you out of the city. Livia's eyes widened. Leave? But where would we go? I have a property in the countryside, Kawa explained. It's secluded, secure. You and the girls will be safe there while I deal with this. Livia shook her head vehemently. No. No, Kawa, I'm not leaving you to face this alone. We're in this together now. Before Kawa could argue, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. His blood ran cold as he read the words on the screen. Family dinner tonight, 8 p.m. Don't be late, nephew. We have much to discuss. Evaristo. Kawa showed the message to Livia, watching as fear and determination battled in her eyes. "It's a trap," she whispered. "Kawa, you can't go." But Kawa knew he had no choice. If he wanted answers, if he wanted to protect his family, he had to face Evaristo head-on. "I have to," he said softly, "but I'll be careful. And I'll have backup nearby, just in case." As they sat there, the weight of the situation pressing down on them, the sound of little feet pattering down the hallway broke the tension. Bianca and Lorena burst into the room, full of energy and innocence, blissfully unaware of the danger swirling around them. Kawa pulled the girls into a tight hug, breathing in their scent, committing every detail to memory. Whatever happened tonight, he would do everything in his power to keep them safe. As he prepared to leave for the dinner, Kawa couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into the lion's den. But he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Little did he know, the revelations awaiting him at his uncle's table would change everything he thought he knew about his family, his past, and the very foundations of his world. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the Mendez family to its core, unleashing secrets that had been buried for decades. As Kawa kissed Livia and the girls goodbye, he silently vowed to return to them, to protect the future they were building together. But the path ahead was fraught with danger, and the line between ally and enemy was about to become more blurred than ever before. The Mendez family estate loomed before Kawa, its grand facade a testament to generations of wealth and power. As he stepped out of his car, handing the keys to the valet, Kawa couldn't help but feel like he was walking into a battlefield rather than a family dinner. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and ascended the marble steps. The massive oak door swung open before he could knock, revealing his mother, Marlene, elegant as always, in a designer dress and pearls. "Kawa, darling," she greeted, air-kissing his cheeks. "It's been too long. Your uncle was beginning to think you'd forgotten about us." Kawa forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. "Never, mother. Just been busy with work, that's all." As they walked through the opulent foyer, Kawa's mind raced. How much did his mother know? Was she involved in Evaristo's schemes, or was she an innocent bystander? The dining room was a study in old-world luxury, crystal chandeliers, antique furniture, and a table long enough to seat 20, though tonight it was set for just 3. At the head of the table sat Evaristo, a glass of whiskey in hand and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nephew," Evaristo boomed, rising to clasp Kawa's hand, "so good of you to join us. We have much to discuss." Kawa took his seat, acutely aware of the tension simmering beneath the veneer of familial warmth. As the first course was served, a delicate soup that Kawa barely tasted, Evaristo launched into a monologue about the company's latest acquisitions and future plans. It wasn't until the main course arrived that Evaristo changed tack. "So, Kawa," he said, his tone deceptively casual, "I hear you've had some unexpected visitors recently." Kawa's hand tightened on his fork, but he kept his face neutral. "Oh? And where did you hear that, uncle?" Evaristo's smile turned predatory. "Come now, nephew. Did you really think you could hide Livia's return from me? This is my city, after all. Very little happens here without my knowledge." The room seemed to chill by several degrees. Marlene looked between them, confusion and worry etched on her face. "Livia? But she disappeared years ago. Kawa, what's going on?" Kawa set down his cutlery, meeting Evaristo's gaze head-on. "Why don't you tell us, uncle? Since you seem to know so much about it." Evaristo leaned back in his chair, swirling his whiskey. "It's quite simple, really. Livia stumbled upon something she shouldn't have all those years ago, something that could have caused a lot of trouble for a lot of important people. I merely encouraged her to take an extended vacation." "Encouraged?" Kawa's voice was low, dangerous. "Is that what you call threats and intimidation?" Marlene gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Evaristo, what is he talking about? What have you done?" Evaristo's facade of geniality slipped, revealing a cold, calculating look that Kawa had never seen before. "What I had to do to protect this family, this legacy. Your son may have forgotten the importance of loyalty, but I haven't." "Loyalty?" Kawa scoffed, rising to his feet. "You forced the woman I love into hiding, separated me from my children for 7 years, all to protect your dirty secrets. That's not loyalty, uncle, that's tyranny." Evaristo stood as well, his imposing figure casting a shadow across the table. "You understand nothing, boy. The world we operate in isn't black and white. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "And who decides what that greater good is?" Kawa demanded. "You? The corrupt politicians and businessmen you've been protecting?" Marlene's voice cut through the tension, small and frightened. "Evaristo, please, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't—" But Evaristo's attention was solely on Kawa. "You have a choice to make, nephew. Join us, protect what we've built, or step aside. But know this, if you choose to stand against me, I won't hesitate to crush you, Livia, and those little girls of yours." The threat hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Kawa felt a surge of rage unlike anything he'd ever experienced. In that moment, he saw Evaristo for what he truly was, not the charismatic uncle he'd admired for years, but a dangerous, ruthless man who would stop at nothing to maintain his power. "You're wrong, uncle," Kawa said, his voice steady despite the anger coursing through him. "I'm not the one who has to make a choice, you do. Turn yourself in, confess to everything, or I'll bring you down myself. And believe me, I have the means to do it." Evaristo's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing, you have nothing." Kawan allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Are you willing to bet everything on that? Because I'm not bluffing, uncle. Not anymore." For a moment, the room was silent save for Marlene's quiet sobs. Then, with a speed that belied his age, Evaristo lunged across the table, grabbing Kawa by the lapels. "You ungrateful whelp," he snarled. "I made you. I can unmake you just as easily." Kawa didn't flinch. "Try it," he said softly. "But remember, uncle, I'm not the scared little boy you used to intimidate. I'm the man you taught to be ruthless in business. And now I'm going to use everything you taught me to bring you to justice." With that, Kawa wrenched himself free from Evaristo's grasp and strode towards the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at his mother. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't be part of this anymore. I hope you'll make the right choice when the time comes." As Kawa walked out into the cool night air, he felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. He had just declared war on one of the most powerful men in Brazil. The path ahead would be dangerous, possibly deadly. But for the first time in years, Kawa felt truly alive. He pulled out his phone, dialing Livia's number. As he waited for her to pick up, Kawa knew that the real battle was just beginning. But with Livia by his side and the truth as his weapon, he was ready to face whatever came next. Little did he know, the revelations of the night were just the tip of the iceberg. The war he had just initiated would unearth secrets that would shake the very foundations of São Paulo's elite and test the limits of love, loyalty, and redemption. Livia paced the length of Kawa's penthouse living room, her eyes darting to the clock every few seconds. The girls were asleep in their room, blissfully unaware of the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. When her phone finally buzzed with Kawan's call, she nearly dropped it in her haste to answer. "Kawa, are you all right? What happened?" His voice came through, tight with barely contained emotion. "I'm on my way back. It's worse than we thought, Livia. Evaristo knows you're here and he's not going to let this go without a fight." Livia's heart raced. "Did he threaten you?" "The girls?" "Not directly, but the implication was clear." Kawa's voice softened. "Don't worry, I'm almost home. We'll figure this out together." As Livia ended the call, a memory surfaced, a fragment of the past she'd tried so hard to forget. She found herself transported back 7 years to the night that had changed everything. Livia had been working late at the Mendes Corporation, organizing files for an upcoming merger. As Kawa's fiancée and a junior executive, she had been eager to prove herself worthy of her position. That's when she had stumbled upon the document, a detailed ledger of bribes, kickbacks, and illegal deals, involving some of the most powerful names in Brazilian politics and business. Her hands had shaken as she'd read through the pages, recognizing names of politicians, judges, and business leaders. But it was the name at the top of the list that had made her blood run cold: Evaristo Mendes. She had been so engrossed in the document that she hadn't heard the office door open. It wasn't until a shadow fell across the desk that she looked up, straight into Evaristo's cold, calculating eyes. "My dear Livia," he had said, his voice deceptively gentle, "I'm afraid you've seen something you weren't meant to see." What followed was a nightmare of threats and ultimatums. Evaristo had made it clear. If Livia didn't disappear, taking the document with her, he would ensure that Kawa's promising career and possibly his life would be cut short. And when Livia had revealed her pregnancy, hoping it might soften Evaristo's heart, it had only given him more leverage. "Think of those innocent lives," he had said, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "Would you really want them growing up without a father? Or worse, not growing up at all?" Trapped and terrified, Livia had made the hardest decision of her life. She had fled that very night, taking only the clothes on her back and the damning document that had cost her everything. The sound of the penthouse door opening snapped Livia back to the present. Kawa strode in, his face a mask of determination and barely contained anger. "Livia," he breathed, pulling her into a tight embrace. For a moment, they just held each other, drawing strength from the connection they had rekindled. When they finally pulled apart, Kawa's eyes were blazing with a mixture of rage and resolve. "We need to move fast," he said. "Evaristo knows you're back, and he's not going to sit idly by while we threaten his empire." Livia nodded, her mind racing. "The document, we need to get it. It's the only leverage we have against him." Kawa raised an eyebrow. "You still have it? After all these years?" "I couldn't risk destroying it," Livia explained. "It was the only thing keeping us alive. I hid it, somewhere I thought no one would ever look." As Livia revealed the location of the document, Kawa's eyes widened in surprise and admiration. It was a brilliant hiding place, one that spoke to Livia's intelligence and foresight. "We'll retrieve it first thing in the morning," Kawa said. "But tonight we need to focus on keeping you and the girls safe. I've arranged for increased security, but we should be prepared to move at a moment's notice." As they sat on the couch planning their next moves, Livia couldn't help but marvel at the man beside her. The Kawa she had left behind 7 years ago had been ambitious and kind, but somewhat naive to the darker aspects of the business world. The man beside her now was hardened, strategic, yet still driven by a deep sense of justice and love. "Kawa," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm, "I'm sorry for everything. If I had known another way." Kawa turned to her, his eyes softening. "You did what you had to do to protect our family. I understand that now, but Livia, you're not alone anymore. Whatever comes next, we face it together." As they sat there, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hanging over them, a small voice came from the hallway. "Mama? Papa? Is everything okay?" They turned to see Bianca standing there, rubbing her eyes sleepily. In an instant, Livia and Kawa's expressions transformed, masks of calm settling over their worried features. "Everything's fine, sweetie," Livia soothed, opening her arms. Bianca padded over, climbing into her mother's lap. "Papa and I were just talking about a surprise for you and Lorena." Kawa smiled, ruffling Bianca's hair gently. "That's right, Princessa. How would you like to go on a little trip tomorrow?" As Bianca's eyes lit up with excitement, Livia and Kawa exchanged a look over her head. They both knew that the trip was really an escape plan, a way to get the girls to safety, while they dealt with the storm that was coming. But for now, in this moment, they allowed themselves to bask in the warmth of family, the family they had lost and found again. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by love and a shared determination to build a better future. As Kawa tucked Bianca back into bed, whispering stories of grand adventures to come, Livia stood in the doorway, her heart swelling with love and fear in equal measure. The road ahead would be treacherous, but with Kawa by her side and their daughters to protect, she felt ready to face whatever Evaristo and his corrupt empire might throw at them. The echoes of the past still reverberated around them, but for the first time in 7 years, Livia dared to hope for a future, free from shadows and secrets. As she and Kawa retired to their room, hands intertwined, they both knew that the real battle was just beginning. But together, they were a force to be reckoned with, a family united against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. The early morning sun had barely begun to peek over São Paulo's skyline when Kawa and Livia set their plan into motion. They had spent most of the night strategizing, weighing their options, and preparing for every possible scenario. "Are you sure about this?" Kawa asked as they stood in the penthouse's living room, the girls still asleep in their beds. "Maybe I should go alone. It's safer that way." Livia shook her head, determination etched on her face. "No, we do this together. I hid the document. I need to be there to retrieve it. Besides, we're stronger as a team. Kawa nodded, a mix of pride and concern in his eyes. He turned to the man standing quietly in the corner, Zhuang, his most trusted security officer. You know the plan. Get the girls to the safe house as soon as we leave. No stops, no detours, and Zhuang, trust no one. Zhuang nodded solemnly. With my life, sir. They'll be safe, I promise. With one last look towards the girls' room, Kawa and Livia stepped into the private elevator. As the doors closed, Livia reached out and squeezed Kawan's hand. No words were needed. The gesture conveyed everything: fear, love, determination. The ride to their destination was tense, both of them hyper-aware of their surroundings. Kawa had chosen an inconspicuous car, and they had taken a circuitous route to avoid any potential tails. Finally, they pulled up in front of an old, rather decrepit-looking building in one of São Paulo's older neighborhoods. Here? Kawa asked, surprise evident in his voice. This is where you hid it? Livia managed a small smile. Hide in plain sight, right? Come on. They made their way into the building, climbing creaking stairs to the 3rd floor. Livia led them to a door at the end of the hallway, producing a key from her pocket. As the door swung open, Kawa's eyes widened in understanding. The room was filled with art supplies, canvases, and half-finished paintings. It was a studio, Livia's old studio, the one she had used in college. I never sold it, Livia explained, as she moved purposefully through the cluttered space. Kept paying the rent all these years. I knew no one would think to look for a multi-million-dollar secret in a starving artist's studio. She approached a large, paint-splattered canvas leaning against the wall. With Kawa's help, she carefully moved it aside, revealing a small safe built into the wall behind it. Livia's hands shook slightly as she input the combination. The safe clicked open, and there it was, a thick manila envelope, yellowed with age but intact. Livia pulled it out reverently, handing it to Kawa. This is it, she said softly. Everything we need to bring Evaristo down. Kawa took the envelope, feeling the weight of its contents. Not just physically, but the weight of the lives it could change, the power structures it could topple. He was about to speak when a noise from the hallway caught his attention. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful, approaching their door. Kawa and Livia exchanged alarmed glances. They weren't supposed to have been followed. How had anyone known they were here? The window, Kawa whispered urgently. We need to go. Now. They rushed to the window, Kawa shoving the envelope into his jacket. Just as they were about to climb out onto the fire escape, the door burst open. 3 men in dark suits entered, guns drawn. Well, well, a familiar voice drawled. Evaristo stepped into the room, a cold smile on his face. Isn't this a touching family reunion? I must say, Livia, I'm impressed. Hiding the document here all these years. Very clever. Kawa pushed Livia behind him, his mind racing for a way out. It's over, Uncle. We have the evidence. It's only a matter of time before it reaches the authorities. Evaristo's smile didn't waver. Oh, I don't think so, nephew. You see, while you've been playing detective, I've been busy too. Your daughters, for instance, charming girls. It would be a shame if anything were to happen to them. Livia gasped, her face paling. You wouldn't I? Evaristo's eyes glittered dangerously. Now, let's make this simple. Hand over the document, and your precious little family gets to live, resist, and... well, I'm sure you can imagine the consequences. Kawa felt the weight of the envelope in his jacket, the weight of the choice before him, the lives of his daughters hanging in the balance, the future of his family, of justice itself, resting on his decision. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The room fell silent, the tension palpable as Kawa weighed his options. His eyes met Livia's, seeing the fear there, but also a flicker of something else. Trust. She trusted him to make the right choice, whatever that might be. Slowly, Kawa reached into his jacket, his hand closing around the envelope. The future of everything he held dear rested in his next move. As he began to withdraw the document, the room held its collective breath, waiting to see which way the scales of fate would tip. Little did any of them know, the true game-changer was already in motion, set to alter the course of their confrontation in ways none of them could have predicted. The tension in the cramped art studio was suffocating as Kawa slowly pulled the envelope from his jacket. Evaristo's eyes gleamed with triumph, his hand outstretched to claim his prize. But just as Kawa was about to hand over the document, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Shouts and the sound of running feet echoed through the building. Evaristo's men turned towards the door, momentarily distracted. In that split second, Kawa made his move. With lightning speed, he shoved the envelope back into his jacket and grabbed Livia's hand. "Now!" he yelled, and they both dove for the window. They scrambled onto the fire escape as chaos erupted behind them. Gunshots rang out, but whether they were aimed at them or the new arrivals, Kawa couldn't tell. He and Livia clattered down the metal stairs, adrenaline pumping through their veins. As they reached the alley below, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Mendez, this way!" Clara, Kawa's assistant, was waving frantically from the driver's seat of a nondescript sedan. Without hesitation, Kawa and Livia sprinted towards the car, diving into the back seat as Clara floored the accelerator. "Clara?" Kawa gasped as they sped away from the scene. "How did you—" "No time to explain now, sir." Clara cut him off, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "We're being followed." Sure enough, 2 black SUVs had peeled out of the alley behind them, engines roaring as they gave chase. Clara navigated the early morning traffic with skill, but their pursuers were gaining ground. "The girls," Livia said suddenly, her voice tight with fear. "Evaristo threatened the girls. We need to make sure they're safe." Kawa was already dialing João's number, his heart pounding. When João answered, Kawa could hear the sound of a car engine in the background. "João, status report. Are the girls safe?" "Yes, sir," João's calm voice came through. "We're en route to the safe house now." No signs of trouble. Kawa let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Good. Change of plans. Take them to location B and João. Trust no one but yourself." As he ended the call, Kawa turned to Clara. "We need to lose these guys. Any ideas?" Clara's face was a mask of concentration as she weaved through traffic. "I might have one." "Hold on tight." She made a sudden turn, tires screeching as they entered a narrow side street. The SUVs behind them struggled to make the turn, buying them precious seconds. Clara navigated a series of twists and turns, eventually emerging onto a busy avenue. "There," she said, pointing to a nearby shopping center, "the parking garage. We can switch cars there." They pulled into the garage, Clara driving up several levels before finding a secluded spot. As they exited the car, she popped the trunk, revealing a duffel bag. "Change of clothes," she explained, handing the bag to Livia. "And a backup phone for you, Mr. Mendez. Untraceable." As Livia quickly changed, Kawa turned to Clara, his mind whirling with questions. "Clara, how did you know where to find us? And how did you prepare all this?" Clara's expression turned serious. "After our meeting at the warehouse, I knew things were going to get dangerous. I've been preparing contingencies just in case. As for finding you, I placed a tracker on your watch the last time you had me take it for repairs. I'm sorry for the invasion of privacy, but I had a feeling it might come in handy." Kawa was stunned by Clara's foresight and loyalty. "Clara, thank you. You might have just saved our lives." A small smile flickered across Clara's face. "Just doing my job, sir. Now we should keep moving. I have another car waiting 2 levels down." As they made their way to the new vehicle, Kawan's mind was racing. They had the document, but Evaristo was still a threat. And now, with his open threats against the girls, the stakes were higher than ever. "We need a plan," Livia said as they settled into the new car, Clara once again taking the wheel. "We can't just keep running." Kawa nodded, his expression grim. "You're right, it's time we took the fight to Evaristo, but first we need allies, people we can trust." He pulled out the new phone Clara had given him, dialing a number he hadn't used in years. As it rang, Kawa took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Hello?" a gruff voice answered. "Detective Rodriguez," Kawa said. "It's Kawa Mendez. I have information about a major corruption scandal involving some of the most powerful people in Sao Paulo. Are you still in the business of taking down dirty politicians and businessmen?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, then, "I'm listening." As Kawa began to outline the situation, he felt a glimmer of hope. They were no longer alone in this fight. With Clara's resourcefulness, Detective Rodriguez's integrity, and the damning evidence in the document, they had a chance to bring Evaristo's empire crumbling down. But Kawa knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger. Evaristo was cornered now, and a cornered predator was the most dangerous kind. As they drove through the bustling streets of São Paulo, heading towards an uncertain future, Cauã reached out and took Livia's hand. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing. Between them, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For their daughters, for justice, and for the future they had dreamed of all those years ago. The game had changed, the tables had turned, and now it was time to see who would emerge victorious in this high-stakes battle of wills and secrets. The nondescript café on the outskirts of São Paulo buzzed with the low murmur of conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. In a corner booth, partially obscured by a large potted plant, sat Cauã, Livia, and Clara. Their eyes constantly scanned the room, alert for any sign of threat. The bell above the door chimed, and a man in his mid-50s entered. His salt-and-pepper hair was cropped short, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen too much of the world's darker side. Detective Rodriguez spotted them immediately, making his way over with purposeful strides. "Mendes," he greeted gruffly, sliding into the booth. His sharp eyes took in Livia and Clara, before returning to Cauã. "It's been a while. You said you had information." Cauã nodded, reaching into his jacket to retrieve the envelope. He placed it on the table, his hand resting protectively on top. "This contains evidence of a massive corruption scheme involving some of the most powerful people in Brazil. My uncle, Evaristo Mendes, is at the center of it all." Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up. "Evaristo Mendes, the philanthropist? The man half the city wants to nominate for sainthood." "The very same," Livia interjected, her voice tight. "Believe me, detective, his public image is nothing but a carefully crafted lie." The detective's gaze shifted to Livia, curiosity evident in his eyes. Cauã quickly made introductions, giving Rodriguez a brief overview of Livia's history with the document and her years in hiding. As Cauã began to outline the contents of the document, Rodriguez's expression grew increasingly grave. He occasionally jotted notes in a small, worn notebook, his frown deepening with each new revelation. "This is explosive," Rodriguez said finally, leaning back in his seat. "If even half of what you're saying is true, it could bring down not just your uncle, but a significant portion of São Paulo's elite." "Which is exactly why we need your help," Cauã pressed. "We can't trust the regular channels. Too many people on Evaristo's payroll. We need someone with integrity, someone who can't be bought." Rodriguez snorted. "And you think that's me?" "I'm flattered, Mendes. But what makes you so sure I'm not on your uncle's list of paid friends?" "Because," Cauã said, leaning forward, "if you were, we'd already be dead or in Evaristo's custody. The fact that you're here, listening to us, tells me everything I need to know." A tense silence fell over the table. Rodriguez studied Cauã intently, as if trying to peer into his very soul. Finally, he nodded. "All right, I'm in. But you need to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. We'll be painting targets on our backs. Are you prepared for that?" Cauã exchanged glances with Livia and Clara. The determination in their eyes matched his own. "We're prepared," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes to bring Evaristo down and ensure our family's safety." Rodriguez nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Okay then. First things first. We need to get this document somewhere safe. I have a secure location where we can analyze it thoroughly and start building our case." As they began to discuss the logistics of their next moves, Clara suddenly stiffened, her eyes fixed on something over Cauã's shoulder. "Don't react," she said softly, "but I think we're being watched." Cauã resisted the urge to turn around, instead casually reaching for his coffee cup. As he did so, he caught a glimpse of reflection in the window beside them. A man at the counter, seemingly engrossed in his phone, was angled just so, giving him a clear view of their table. "We need to move," Rodriguez said, his voice low and urgent. "Now!" They began to gather their things, trying to appear casual. But as they stood to leave, the man at the counter suddenly moved, reaching into his jacket. Cauã's heart raced, expecting to see a gun. Instead, the man pulled out a badge. "Federal Police," he announced, loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. "Nobody move!" Chaos erupted. Patrons scrambled to get out of the way as more agents poured in through the front and back entrances. Rodriguez cursed under his breath, reaching for his own badge. "This is Detective Rodriguez, São Paulo PD," he called out. "What's the meaning of this?" The lead agent approached, his face impassive. Detective Rodriguez, Mr. Mendez, we're going to need you all to come with us. We have some questions regarding an ongoing investigation into corruption and money laundering. Kawan's mind raced. Was this Evaristo's doing? Had he somehow manipulated even the federal police? Or was this a legitimate investigation that had inadvertently caught them in its net? As they were led out of the cafe, Kawan caught Livia's eye. The fear there was evident, but so was the resolve. Whatever was happening, they were in it together. The agents ushered them into separate vehicles. As the doors closed and the cars pulled away, Kawan couldn't shake the feeling that they had just entered a new phase of this dangerous game. The board had shifted, new players had entered, and the stakes had never been higher. As São Paulo's streets blurred past the window, Kawan steeled himself for whatever lay ahead. He had made a promise to protect his family and expose the truth. No matter what challenges arose, he was determined to see it through to the end. Little did he know the revelations awaiting him would shake the very foundations of everything he thought he knew about his family, his past, and the intricate web of power that controlled São Paulo's underworld. The stark fluorescent lights of the federal police interrogation room cast harsh shadows across Kawan's face as he sat, waiting. Hours had passed since they'd been brought in, separated and questioned individually. The initial fear had given way to a simmering frustration and determination. The door opened, and a woman in a crisp suit entered. She introduced herself as Agent Fernanda Ribeiro, her expression unreadable as she took the seat across from Kawan. "Mr. Mendez," she began, her tone professional but not unkind. "We've spoken with Detective Rodriguez and reviewed the preliminary evidence you've provided. I must say it's quite something." Kawan leaned forward, hope flaring in his chest. "Then you believe us? You'll help us bring Evaristo to justice?" Agent Ribeiro held up a hand. "It's not that simple, Mr. Mendez. The allegations you're making, they implicate some very powerful people. We can't just rush in without ironclad evidence." "But the document," Kawan started, but Ribeiro cut him off. "Is compelling, yes, but it's also 7 years old. We need more. Recent evidence, corroborating testimonies, something that proves this isn't just a personal vendetta against your uncle." Kawan felt a mix of frustration and understanding. He knew she was right, but the thought of more delays, more chances for Evaristo to cover his tracks, made his stomach churn. "There's something else," Ribeiro continued, her expression softening slightly. "We've been investigating Evaristo Mendez for months now. Your information fills in a lot of gaps, but it also raises new questions, particularly about the involvement of other family members." Kawan's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Ribeiro slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, surveillance images of his mother, Marlene, meeting with known criminals and corrupt politicians. "Your mother has been on our radar for a while," Ribeiro explained gently. "We believe she may have been more involved in Evaristo's operations than even you realized." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Kawan stared at the photos, his mind reeling. His mother, who had always seemed so removed from the business world, so focused on her charities and social events. Had she really been part of this all along? I don't understand," Kawan muttered, more to himself than to Ribeiro. "Mr. Mendez," Ribeiro said, leaning forward, "I know this is a lot to process, but we need your help, your inside knowledge of the family, combined with what you've already uncovered. It could be the key to bringing down this entire network." Kawan looked up, meeting Ribeiro's gaze. "What do you need me to do?" "We need you to go back, to work with your uncle, to regain his trust. We need you to be our eyes and ears inside the Mendez empire." The request hung in the air, heavy with implications. Kawan thought of Livia, of their daughters. Could he really put them at risk by diving back into the lion's den? As if reading his thoughts, Ribeiro spoke again. "We'll protect your family, Mr. Mendez. Round-the-clock surveillance, secure accommodations. But we need you on the inside. It's the only way to gather the evidence we need to make this stick." Kawan closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them, there was a steely resolve in his gaze. "All right, I'll do it, but I have conditions." Over the next hour, Kawan and Ribeiro hashed out the details of their agreement. By the time he left the interrogation room, a plan was in place. It was dangerous, potentially disastrous, but it was also their best chance at bringing Evaristo to justice and ensuring his family's safety. As Kawan was led to a room where Livia waited, His mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The revelation about his mother had shaken him to his core, but it had also strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just about protecting his immediate family anymore. It was about unraveling the web of lies and corruption that had ensnared his entire family for who knew how long. When he saw Livia, the worry etched on her face melted into relief. She rushed into his arms, and for a moment, Kawa allowed himself to draw strength from her embrace. "What's happening?" Livia whispered. Are we under arrest?" Kawa pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. "No, Querida, we're not under arrest. But things have complicated. There's so much I need to tell you." As Kawa began to explain the situation, the federal investigation, the plan for him to go undercover, the shocking revelations about his mother, he could see the mix of fear and determination in Livia's eyes. "It's dangerous," she said when he had finished. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Kawa admitted, "but it's our best chance." Her only chance, really. Livia was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. Then, with a deep breath, she looked up at Kawa, a fierce light in her eyes. "Then we do it together. I'm not letting you face this alone. Not again." Kawa started to protest, but Livia placed a finger on his lips. "No arguments, we're stronger together, remember? If you're going back into that world, you'll need someone to watch your back. Someone Evaristo would never suspect." As the weight of their decision settled over them, Kawa and Livia held each other close. They both knew that the path ahead was fraught with danger, that they were walking a tightrope over an abyss of secrets and lies. But they also knew that together they stood a chance of not just surviving, but of bringing the truth to light. Outside the room, Agent Ribeiro watched the couple through the one-way glass. She turned to Detective Rodriguez, who stood beside her. "Do you think they can pull this off?" she asked. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "If anyone can," he said finally, "it's them. They've got something Evaristo and his cronies don't." "And what's that?" Ribeiro asked. Rodriguez smiled, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Something worth fighting for." As night fell over São Paulo, the pieces were set. The final gambit was about to begin, a high-stakes game of deception and revelation that would either bring down an empire of corruption or destroy the very family it sought to save. For Kawa and Livia, there was no turning back. The only way out was through, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The Mendes Corporation's towering headquarters cast a long shadow over São Paulo's financial district, a gleaming monument to power and wealth. Kawa stood before it, adjusting his tie and steeling his nerves. It had been less than a week since his confrontation with Evaristo, and now he was walking back into the belly of the beast. "Remember," Agent Ribeiro's voice crackled through the nearly invisible earpiece, "we need concrete evidence, recordings, documents, anything that can corroborate what's in that ledger. But be careful. If Evaristo suspects anything—" "I know," Kawa interrupted, his voice low. "Trust me, I'm well aware of the stakes." He took a deep breath and strode through the revolving doors, nodding to the security guards who seemed surprised to see him. The elevator ride to the executive floor was tense, Kawa's mind racing through all the possible scenarios that could unfold. As the doors slid open, he was greeted by a familiar face. Clara, her expression a careful mask of professionalism. "Mr. Mendes," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "Your uncle is expecting you in the boardroom." Kawa nodded, following her down the hallway. As they walked, Clara leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Be careful in there. Something's off." Evaristo's been in closed-door meetings all week. Before Kawa could respond, they reached the boardroom. Clara knocked once and opened the door, announcing, "Mr. Kawa Mendes, sir." Evaristo sat at the head of the long table, flanked by several men Kawa recognized as high-ranking executives, and to his surprise, his mother, Marlene. Evaristo's face broke into a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, nephew, so good of you to join us. We were just discussing the future of our family business." Kawa stepped into the room, hyper-aware of every gaze upon him. "Uncle," he greeted, then turned to his mother. "Mom, I didn't expect to see you here." Marlene's smile was strained, her eyes darting between Kawa and Evaristo. "Well, dear, I thought it was time I took a more active role in the family affairs. Evaristo gestured to an empty chair. "Sit, Kawa. We have much to discuss." As Kawa took his seat, Evaristo launched into a presentation about a new development project, a massive undertaking that would reshape an entire neighborhood of São Paulo. On the surface, it seemed like a legitimate business venture, but Kawa's instincts told him there was more beneath the surface. "Of course," Evaristo was saying, "for a project of this scale, we'll need cooperation from various city officials. Marlene, I believe you have some connections that could be useful." Marlene nodded, her voice steady but her hands fidgeting with her necklace. "Yes, I've already reached out to a few key people. They seem amenable to our proposals." Kawa's mind raced, picking up on the subtext. This wasn't just a development project. It was a front for bribes, kickbacks, and who knew what other illegal activities. "And what about you, nephew?" Evaristo's sharp gaze fixed on Kawa. "Are you ready to fully commit to the family business? To do whatever it takes to ensure our success?" The room fell silent, all eyes on Kawa. He could feel the weight of the moment, knew that his response would set the tone for everything that followed. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward. "Uncle," he said, his voice steady, "I think it's time I fully understood exactly what our family business entails. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If I'm to commit, I need to know everything." A tense silence followed his words. Evaristo studied him intently, as if trying to peer into his very soul. Finally, a slow smile spread across his face. "Well said, nephew. Well said indeed. I think it's time we had a private chat, just the two of us. Gentleman Marlene, if you'll excuse us." As the room cleared out, Kawa caught his mother's eye. For a brief moment he saw something there. Fear, regret. But then it was gone, replaced by the polished mask she always wore in public. Once they were alone, Evaristo's demeanor changed. The genial uncle disappeared, replaced by the cold, calculating man Kawan had glimpsed in their last confrontation. "Let's cut to the chase, shall we?" Evaristo said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've been poking around, asking questions. You've seen things you shouldn't have, so here's how this is going to work. You're going to forget about that little document your girlfriend stole. You're going to fall in line and do exactly as I say. And in return, I'll ensure that you, Livia, and those precious little girls of yours get to live long, comfortable lives. Refuse, and, well, I think we both know what happens then." Kawa felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his face impassive. "And if I agree, what exactly would you have me do?" Evaristo's smile was predatory. "Oh, nephew, I have such plans for you. But first, a test of loyalty. There's a shipment coming in tonight, something that could cause us a lot of trouble if it fell into the wrong hands. I need you to personally oversee its safe arrival." As Evaristo laid out the details of the operation, Kawa listened intently, his mind working overtime. This was it, the concrete evidence they needed. But it was also incredibly dangerous. One wrong move and everything could come crashing down. "So," Evaristo said finally, "are you in? Are you ready to truly be a Mendes?" Kawa met his uncle's gaze, forcing himself to show nothing but cool determination. "I'm in, uncle. Whatever it takes." As he left the office a short while later, Kawa's heart was pounding. He had taken the first step into a very dangerous game. Now he just had to figure out how to play it, without losing everything or everyone he held dear. Little did he know, the true test of his resolve was yet to come, and it would shake the very foundations of his world. The São Paulo night was thick with humidity, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Kawa stood on the balcony of his penthouse, his eyes fixed on the city sprawled before him, but his mind far away. In just a few hours, he would be heading to the docks, ostensibly to oversee the arrival of Evaristo's mysterious shipment. Behind him, the sliding door opened, and Livia stepped out. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. For a moment they stood in silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. "Are you sure about this?" Livia asked softly. "It's not too late to back out." Kawan turned, pulling her into a proper embrace. "We're in too deep now, querida. This might be our only chance to get the evidence we need." Livia nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Just be careful. Remember, Bianca and Lorena need their father." The mention of their daughters sent a pang through Kawan's heart. The girls were safely hidden away with João, Kawan's trusted security officer, but the separation was taking its toll on all of them. "I'll be careful," Kawa promised, pressing a kiss to Livia's forehead. "And soon, this will all be over. We'll be together again, safe and free." As they broke apart, Kawa's phone buzzed with a message from Clara. It was time. The drive to the docks was tense, the city streets eerily quiet in the late hour. Kawa parked his car in the shadows of a warehouse, his heart racing as he stepped out into the cool night air. The earpiece Agent Ribeiro had given him crackled to life. "Remember, Mendes?" Her voice came through low and urgent. "We need solid evidence. Photos, recordings, anything concrete. But your safety comes first. If things go south, abort immediately." Kawa murmured his acknowledgement and made his way towards the designated meeting point. As he rounded a corner, he saw a group of men gathered near a cargo container. His uncle Evaristo stood at the center, his face illuminated by the harsh dock lights. "Ah, Kawa," Evaristo called out, his voice jovial, but his eyes sharp. "Right on time. Come, let me show you how we handle the more delicate aspects of our business." As Kawa approached, Evaristo gestured to the container. Two men pried open the doors, revealing stacks of wooden crates. Kawa's breath caught in his throat as he realized what he was seeing: weapons, and lots of them. "Impressive, isn't it?" Evaristo said, clapping Kawa on the shoulder. "This shipment alone will set us up nicely with some very influential friends." Kawa forced himself to nod, his mind racing. He needed to document this somehow, but with Evaristo's men watching his every move, how could he? A commotion from the far end of the dock interrupted his thoughts. Shouts echoed across the water, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. "What the hell?" Evaristo snarled, pulling out his phone. "Who dares—" But before he could finish, a voice boomed out across the docks. "Federal police, everyone freeze!" Chaos erupted. Evaristo's men scattered, some drawing weapons while others made a break for it. Kawa found himself pushed to the ground by his uncle, who was shouting orders and curses in equal measure. In the confusion, Kawa managed to pull out his phone, quickly snapping photos of the open container and the scattered crates. He had just managed to send them to the secure server Ribeiro had set up when a hand grabbed his arm roughly. "You!" Evaristo hissed, his face contorted with rage. "So you brought them here, didn't you?" Before Kawa could respond, another explosion of gunfire sent them both ducking for cover. Evaristo's grip on Kawa's arm tightened painfully. "We're leaving, now!" Evaristo growled, dragging Kawa towards a waiting car. As they sped away from the docks, sirens wailing in the distance, Kawa's mind raced. This wasn't part of the plan. The raid wasn't supposed to happen tonight. Something had gone terribly wrong. They drove in tense silence, Evaristo barking orders into his phone while keeping a watchful eye on Kawa. Finally, they pulled up to a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. "Out!" Evaristo commanded, shoving Kawa towards the entrance. Inside, Kawa was surprised to find his mother, Marlene, pacing nervously. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw them. "Evaristo? Kawa? What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. Evaristo ignored her, pushing Kawa into a chair. "Someone tipped off the feds," he snarled, "and I want to know who." Kawa met his uncle's gaze steadily. "I don't know what you're talking about, Uncle. I was there because you asked me to be, remember?" Evaristo's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Don't play games with me, boy. You've been acting strange ever since Livia came back into the picture. Speaking of which," he turned to one of his men, "bring her in, and the children too." Kawa's blood ran cold. "No, leave them out of this." But Evaristo was beyond reason. As Kawa struggled against the men holding him down, he caught sight of his mother. Marlene stood frozen, her face a mask of horror and guilt. "Mom!" Kawa called out, desperation in his voice. "Mom, please, help me stop this." Marlene's eyes met Kawa's, and for a moment he saw a flicker of the mother he remembered from his childhood. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Evaristo," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "This has gone too far, we need to—" But whatever she was about to say was cut off by the sound of screeching tires outside. Moments later, the door burst open, and Livia was shoved into the room, followed by two men carrying the terrified forms of Bianca and Lorena. The sight of his daughters in danger snapped something in Kawa. With a surge of adrenaline, he broke free from his captors, placing himself between his family and Evaristo. "Enough," he roared, his voice echoing in the tense silence. "This ends now, Uncle. Whatever happens, you leave my family out of it." Evaristo's face twisted into a cruel smile. "Oh, nephew, you still don't understand, do you? Family is all that matters in this world, and sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good of the family." As Evaristo raised his hand, Kawa braced himself for whatever was to come. But in that moment, a new voice cut through the tension. "Federal police! Nobody move!" The room erupted into chaos once more. As agents poured in, Kawa grabbed Livia and the girls, shielding them with his body. Through the commotion, he caught sight of his mother, her eyes locked on his. And in that moment, Kawa saw something he never expected, a look of determination and the faintest nod of acknowledgement. As the dust settled and the federal agents took control of the situation, Kawa held his family close, his mind reeling from the night's events. The game had changed once again, and he knew that the revelations to come would shake the very foundations of everything he thought he knew about his family, his past, and the future he was fighting for. The storm had broken, but the true tempest was yet to come. The harsh fluorescent lights of the federal police station cast unflattering shadows across the faces of those gathered in the cramped conference room. Kawa sat at the table, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Livia's hand clasped tightly in his own. Across from them, Agent Ribeiro shuffled through a stack of papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Mr. Mendes," she began, looking up to meet Kawa's tired gaze. "I want to commend you on your bravery tonight. The evidence you gathered at the docks, combined with the recordings from your wire, gives us a solid foundation to build our case against Evaristo and his network." Kawa nodded, too drained to feel any real sense of triumph. "And my uncle? My mother?" Ribeiro's expression softened slightly. "Evaristo is in custody. He's facing multiple charges, including weapons trafficking, bribery, and conspiracy. As for your mother," she paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Mrs. Mendes is also in custody, but her situation is complicated." "Complicated how?" Livia asked, her voice laced with concern. Ribeiro sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It appears that your mother's involvement in Evaristo's operations was more nuanced than we initially believed. We have evidence suggesting that she may have been working as an informant for another agency for quite some time." Kawa felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. "Another agency? Another? What are you saying?" "We're still piecing it all together," Ribeiro explained. "But it seems your mother has been feeding information about Evaristo's operations to Interpol for the past 5 years. Her actions tonight, alerting us to the situation at the safe house, corroborate this." The revelation hit Kawa like a physical blow. His mother, whom he had feared was deeply entrenched in Evaristo's corrupt world, had actually been working to bring it down from the inside. The implications were staggering. I need to see her," Kawa said, his voice hoarse. Ribeiro nodded sympathetically. "We can arrange that, but not tonight. For now, we need to focus on your safety. Evaristo may be in custody, but his network is vast. There could still be people out there who might want to retaliate." As if on cue, the door opened, and Detective Rodriguez entered, his weathered face grim. "We've secured a safe house for you and your family," he said, addressing Kawa and Livia. "We'll move you there immediately." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Kawa and Livia were reunited with Bianca and Lorena, who had been kept safe by social workers during the operation. The girls were shaken but unharmed, clinging tightly to their parents as they were ushered into an unmarked vehicle. As they drove through the quiet pre-dawn streets of São Paulo, Kawa held his family close, his mind racing with the night's revelations. The world he thought he knew had been turned upside down, and he was still struggling to find his footing. They arrived at a modest house in a nondescript suburban neighborhood. As they were led inside by Agent Ribeiro and Detective Rodriguez, Kawa couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the eye of the storm. The true tempest was yet to come. Once the girls were settled in a bedroom, sound asleep after their ordeal, Kawa and Livia sat at the kitchen table with Ribeiro and Rodriguez. The weight of everything that had transpired hung heavy in the air. "What happens now?" Livia asked, breaking the silence. Ribeiro leaned forward, her expression serious. "Now we build our case. The evidence we've gathered is strong, but Evaristo's influence runs deep. We need to be thorough, leave no stone unturned." And what about the company? Kawar asked, thinking of the hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on Mendez Corporation. What happens to it while Evaristo is in custody? That's where you come in, Mr. Mendez, Rodriguez interjected. As the next in line, you're in a position to take control of the company, but it won't be easy. You'll need to root out any remaining corrupt elements while keeping the legitimate parts of the business running. Kawar felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. It was a daunting task, but one he knew he had to undertake. Not just for himself, but for every honest employee who had been unwittingly caught up in Evaristo's web of deceit. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "Whatever it takes to make this right." Livia squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride and determination. "We'll do it together," she corrected. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the windows, Kawar felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, fraught with dangers both seen and unseen. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. Little did he know the greatest challenges and the most shocking revelations were yet to come. As São Paulo awakened to a new day, the stage was set for a final confrontation that would test the limits of love, loyalty, and redemption. The game wasn't over yet, and the most dangerous players were still moving their pieces in the shadows. The days following the raid blurred together in a whirlwind of police statements, legal consultations, and hushed conversations with Agent Ribeiro. Kawar felt as if he were walking a tightrope, balancing the needs of his family with the demands of the investigation and the precarious state of Mendez Corporation. It was on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning that Kawar finally got the call he had been both dreading and anticipating. His mother, Marlene, had been cleared for visitation. With a mixture of apprehension and determination, Kawar made his way to the Federal Detention Center, where she was being held. The visiting room was stark and impersonal, a far cry from the opulent surroundings Marlene was accustomed to. When she was led in, Kawar was struck by how small and vulnerable she looked in her standard-issue jumpsuit, her usually immaculate hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Kawar," she breathed, her eyes filling with tears as she sat across from him. "My boy, I'm so sorry." For a moment, Kawar was at a loss for words. The woman before him seemed so different from the polished, sometimes distant mother he had known all his life. Finally, he found his voice. "Why, Mom?" he asked, his tone a mixture of confusion and hurt. "Why didn't you tell me what was really going on?" Marlene reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching Kawar's. "I wanted to protect you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought if you didn't know, you'd be safer." Kawar leaned forward, his eyes searching his mother's face. "Agent Ribeiro says you've been working with Interpol. How long? How did it start?" Marlene took a deep breath, seeming to steel herself. "It started about 5 years ago. I had suspicions about Evaristo's dealings for a long time, but it wasn't until I overheard a conversation about Livia that I knew I had to do something." "Livia?" Kawar's heart raced. "What about Livia?" "I heard Evaristo talking about how he had taken care of the problem. He mentioned Livia by name, said something about making sure she stayed gone. I knew then that he must have been behind her disappearance." The revelation hit Kawar like a physical blow. He had suspected Evaristo's involvement, but hearing it confirmed and knowing his mother had known for years was almost too much to bear. "Why didn't you come to me then?" he asked, his voice strained. Marlene's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I was afraid, Kawar. Afraid of what Evaristo might do if he found out I knew. And I was ashamed. Ashamed that I hadn't seen what was happening right under my nose for so long." She paused, taking a shaky breath before continuing. "So I reached out to an old friend, someone I knew worked with Interpol. I became an informant, feeding them information bit by bit, trying to build a case against Evaristo without tipping him off." Kawar sat back, his mind reeling. "All those charity events, the social gatherings, you were gathering information?" Marlene nodded. It was the perfect cover. No one suspects the flighty socialite of being an undercover agent. Despite the gravity of the situation, Kawar felt a grudging admiration for his mother's cunning, but there was still one question burning in his mind. "Mom," he said, leaning forward again, "the document Livia took, the one that started all of this, did you know about it?" Marlene's expression tightened. I knew of its existence, yes, but I didn't know the full contents until recently. Kawa, that document, it doesn't just implicate Evaristo. It goes much deeper, much higher up than we ever imagined. What do you mean? Kawa asked, a sense of foreboding settling in his gut. Marlene glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, before lowering her voice. There are names in that document, Kawa. Names of people in the highest echelons of government, of international business. If this information gets out, it won't just bring down Evaristo. It could destabilize the entire country. The weight of this revelation settled on Kawa's shoulders like a physical burden. He thought of Livia, of their daughters, of the life they had dreamed of building together. How could they ever be truly safe with this kind of information hanging over their heads? As if reading his thoughts, Marlene reached out, this time grasping Kawa's hand tightly. Listen to me, my son, you need to be careful. The people implicated in that document, they won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to keep their secrets buried. You, Livia, the girls, you're all in danger. Kawa squeezed his mother's hand, his mind racing with the implications of everything he had learned. What should we do, he asked, feeling for the first time in years like a child seeking guidance. Marlene's eyes hardened with determination. We fight, she said firmly, but we fight smart. Use the resources at your disposal, the connections I've built over the years, and most importantly, trust in the love you and Livia share. It's gotten you this far. It will see you through to the end. As their visitation time came to an end, Kawa stood, pulling his mother into a tight embrace. I'll get you out of here, he promised. We'll make this right. Marlene pulled back, cupping Kawa's face in her hands. My brave boy, she said softly. I am so proud of the man you've become. Now go, protect your family, and remember, no matter what happens, I love you. As Kawa left the detention center, his mind was a whirlwind of emotions and half-formed plans. He knew that the revelations of the day were just the tip of the iceberg. The true battle was yet to come, and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. Pulling out his phone, he dialed Livia's number. As he waited for her to pick up, Kawa steeled himself for the conversation ahead. They had faced so much already, but he knew that their greatest challenge was still to come. The final act of this drama was about to unfold, and Kawa was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. Little did he know, the sins of the past were about to collide with the hopes of the future in a way that would test the very limits of love, loyalty, and redemption. The safe house felt smaller with each passing day, the walls closing in as Kawa and Livia grappled with the magnitude of the situation they faced. The girls, Bianca and Lorena, picked up on the tension, their usual exuberance muted by the strange circumstances and their parents' obvious worry. It was late in the evening when Kawa finally finished relaying everything he had learned from his mother to Livia. They sat at the small kitchen table, mugs of cold coffee forgotten between them. So, Livia said, her voice barely above a whisper, the document I took, it's even more dangerous than we thought. Kawa nodded grimly. Government officials? International business leaders? Mom says if this gets out, it could destabilize the entire country. Livia leaned back, running a hand through her hair. What do we do, Kawa? We can't just sit on this information, not when it implicates so many powerful people in corruption. But if we release it, we paint an even bigger target on our backs, Kawa finished. He stood, pacing the small kitchen. There has to be a way to use this information to bring down the corrupt elements without causing widespread chaos. A soft knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Agent Ribeiro entered, her face grave. Mr. Mendez, Ms. Santos, we have a situation. Kawa felt his heart rate quicken. What's happened? Ribeiro glanced towards the room where the girls were sleeping before lowering her voice. There's been a leak. Someone in the department tipped off the press about the investigation. It's all over the news, the raid, Evaristo's arrest, everything. Everything? Livia asked, her face paling. Do they know about the document? Ribeiro shook her head. Not the specifics, but there are rumors of damning evidence that could implicate high-level officials. The vultures are circling, and it won't be long before someone puts the pieces together. Kawa exchanged a look with Livia. They both knew what this meant. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. We need to move, Kawa said decisively. If we're going to use this information, It has to be now before anyone can cover their tracks or discredit us. Livia nodded, a determined glint in her eye. I have an idea, but it's risky. We need to call Clara. Over the next few hours, a plan began to take shape. Clara, using her connections in the business world and her knowledge of Mendez Corporation's inner workings, would help them set up a press conference. Under the guise of addressing the rumors and discussing the future of the company, they would use the platform to expose the truth. It's a bold move, Ribeiro cautioned. Are you sure you want to do this? Once you go public, there's no turning back. Kawa looked at Livia, seeing his own resolve mirrored in her eyes. We're sure. It's time to end this, once and for all. As dawn broke over São Paulo, the pieces were set in motion. Clara worked tirelessly, coordinating with sympathetic journalists and setting up secure channels for the information to be disseminated. Detective Rodriguez mobilized trusted officers to provide security for the event. Kawa spent a quiet moment with Bianca and Lorena, trying to explain in simple terms why they needed to be brave for just a little while longer. As he held his daughters close, he silently vowed that after this was over, he would dedicate every moment to giving them the peaceful, happy life they deserved. The day of the press conference dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. As Kawa adjusted his tie, preparing to face the world, Livia approached him, the infamous document clutched in her hands. Are you ready for this? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Kawa pulled her close, drawing strength from her presence. As ready as I'll ever be. Whatever happens, we face it together. They shared a brief, intense kiss before stepping out to meet their destiny. As they made their way to the waiting car, flanked by security, Kawan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the eye of a hurricane. Little did they know, forces were already in motion that would turn their carefully laid plans upside down. The final battle was about to begin, and the stakes were higher than ever. As São Paulo's skyline came into view, Kawan steeled himself for what was to come. The truth was about to be unleashed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Mendez Corporation headquarters loomed before them, its gleaming facade a stark contrast to the turmoil within. As their car pulled up to the underground entrance, Kawan felt a surge of déjà vu. It seemed like a lifetime ago that he had walked these halls as the heir apparent, blissfully unaware of the corruption that festered at the company's core. Security was tight, with both federal agents and trusted members of Kawa's personal team scanning every entrance and exit. As they made their way to the conference room, Kawa could feel the weight of the document in his briefcase, a ticking time bomb ready to reshape the landscape of Brazilian politics and business. Clara met them at the elevator, her usually composed demeanor showing cracks of stress. Everything's set, she reported in a hushed tone. All major networks are here, and we've secured an encrypted live stream for simultaneous online broadcast. Once this starts, there's no stopping it. Kawa nodded, squeezing Livia's hand. Good. Let's hope it's enough to keep us safe once the dust settles. The conference room was a sea of cameras and reporters, an expectant hush falling over the crowd as Kawa and Livia took their places at the podium. Kawa surveyed the room, noting the mix of familiar faces and strangers. In the front row, he spotted Detective Rodriguez and Agent Ribeiro, their presence a silent reminder of the law enforcement backing they had. Taking a deep breath, Kawa began his prepared statement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. As you're aware, recent events have cast a shadow over Mendez Corporation and my family name. Today, we're here to address those events and to share some crucial information. As Kawa spoke, outlining the broad strokes of Evaristo's corruption without delving into specifics, he could see the hunger in the reporters' eyes. They knew something big was coming, and they were poised like predators ready to pounce. Just as Kawa was about to reveal the contents of the document, a commotion at the back of the room caught everyone's attention. The doors burst open, and a group of men in suits pushed their way in, led by a face Kawa knew all too well, Ricardo Almeida, one of his uncle's closest business associates, and, if the document was to be believed, a key player in the corruption network. "This is an outrage," Almeida bellowed, his face red with anger or fear, perhaps both. "Mr. Mendez is not authorized to speak on behalf of the company. This press conference is hereby terminated." Chaos erupted in the room. Reporters shouted questions, security personnel moved to intercept Almeida and his group, and in the confusion, Kawa felt Livia grip his arm tightly. "Kawa," she whispered urgently, "look." Following her gaze, Kawa's blood ran cold. In the midst of the chaos, he spotted a familiar face, João, his trusted security officer, the man entrusted with protecting Bianca and Lorena. But João wasn't moving to defend them. Instead, he was speaking urgently into a phone, his eyes fixed on Kawa with a look that could only be described as predatory. In that moment, Kawa realized the terrible truth. João had betrayed them. And if he was here, then where were the girls? Time seemed to slow as the implications hit him. The girls were vulnerable, the carefully orchestrated press conference was derailing, and enemies were closing in from all sides. Making a split-second decision, Kawa leaned into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "what you are witnessing is an attempt to silence the truth, but the truth will not be silenced." With trembling hands, he opened his briefcase and pulled out the document. This contains evidence of widespread corruption involving not just Mendes Corporation, but government officials, judges, and business leaders across Brazil and beyond. Names, dates, transaction details. It's all here. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the papers in Kawa's hands. Even Almeida and his group seemed frozen, the gravity of the moment sinking in. "I will not be silenced," Kawa continued, his voice gaining strength. "This information will be released in its entirety to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency. The time for secrets is over." As if on cue, Clara stepped forward, distributing flash drives to key reporters. "Everything is here," she announced. "Authenticated and verified." The room erupted once more, this time with a frenzy of activity as reporters rushed to be the first to break the story. Almeida and his associates, realizing the game was up, turned to flee, only to find their path blocked by Agent Ribeiro and a team of federal officers. In the midst of the chaos, Kawa turned to Livia, his eyes wild with fear and determination. "The girls," he said urgently. "We need to get to them now." Livia nodded, her face pale but resolute. As they moved to leave the podium, Detective Rodriguez appeared at their side. "I heard," he said grimly. "We've got a team en route to the safe house, but we should hurry." As they rushed from the room, Kawa's mind raced. He had just unleashed a tsunami of information that would reshape the country's power structures. But none of it mattered if Bianca and Lorena weren't safe. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt interminable. As soon as the doors opened, they sprinted for Rodriguez's waiting car. But before they could reach it, a shot rang out, echoing off the concrete walls. Kawa felt a searing pain in his shoulder, stumbling as Livia screamed his name. As he fell, he saw João step out from behind a pillar, gun raised for another shot. In that moment, as the world seemed to tilt and blur around him, Kawa realized that the final battle was far from over. The truth was out, but the most precious thing in his world, his family, was still in danger. As darkness began to encroach on his vision, Kawa's last conscious thought was a prayer for his daughter's safety and a fierce determination to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The storm had broken, but the true tempest was yet to come. The world came back into focus slowly, painfully. Kawa blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, the sterile smell of disinfectant filling his nostrils. He was in a hospital bed, his left shoulder throbbing beneath a thick layer of bandages. "Kawa, can you hear me?" Livia's voice, thick with worry, cut through the fog in his mind. He turned his head, wincing at the movement. Livia sat beside the bed, her face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept in days. "The girls," Kawa croaked, his throat dry. "Where are the girls?" Livia's eyes filled with tears. We don't know." The safe house was empty when the police arrived. There were signs of a struggle, but no. She swallowed hard. No bodies. "We think João took them." The news hit Kawa like a physical blow. He tried to sit up, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder. "How long have I been out? We need to find them." 3 days, Livia said, gently pushing him back down. "The doctors had to keep you sedated because of the pain, but Kawa, listen to me. A lot has happened while you were unconscious." Over the next hour, Livia filled him in. The document's release had sent shockwaves through Brazil and beyond. High-ranking officials were resigning or being arrested by the hour. Evaristo, facing mounting evidence, had agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency, providing even more damning information. "And João?" Cauã asked, his voice hard. "Still at large," Livia replied, "but there's a nationwide manhunt underway. Every law enforcement agency in the country is looking for him and the girls." Just then, the door opened and Detective Rodriguez entered, followed by Agent Ribeiro. Their faces were grim but determined. "Mr. Mendes," Rodriguez said, "good to see you awake. We may have a lead on João's location." Cauã struggled to sit up again, this time with Livia's help. "Where?" Ribeiro stepped forward, spreading a map on the bed. "We've traced several calls made from João's burner phone. They all triangulate to this area." She pointed to a region of dense forest, several hours outside São Paulo. "It's a remote area," Rodriguez added. "Lots of abandoned properties." "Perfect for hiding out," Cauã's mind raced. "We need to go now." "Whoa, hold on," Livia protested. "You're in no condition to—" "I don't care," Cauã cut her off, his voice firm. "Those are our daughters out there. I'm going." After a heated debate with the doctors, it was agreed that Cauã could leave the hospital, but only if he stayed in the command vehicle during the operation. Within the hour, they were speeding towards the location, a convoy of police vehicles and federal agents in tow. As they drove, Cauã's mind whirled with possibilities. Why had João betrayed them? Was it just about money, or was there something more? And most importantly, were Bianca and Lorena safe? The sun was setting by the time they reached the search area. Teams of agents and officers spread out, combing the dense forest and abandoned structures. Cauã, true to his word, remained in the command vehicle with Livia, listening intently to the radio chatter and watching surveillance feeds. Hours passed with no sign of João or the girls. Cauã could feel the desperation building, threatening to overwhelm him. Then, just as dawn was breaking, a crackle came over the radio. "Command, this is Team Charlie. We've got movement in the old lumber mill northeast quadrant." Cauã's heart leapt. He grabbed the radio. "This is Cauã Mendes. Have you seen the girls?" There was a pause, then, "Negative, sir. But we've positively ID'd João entering the building. He's not alone, but we can't confirm who's with him." Rodriguez, who had been coordinating the ground teams, turned to Cauã and Livia. "We're moving in. I know I can't stop you from coming, but please, stay behind the tactical team." Cauã nodded, already moving towards the door. Livia grabbed his arm. "Together," she said firmly. As they approached the dilapidated lumber mill, the first rays of sunlight were just beginning to filter through the trees. The tactical team moved with practiced precision, surrounding the building. Cauã and Livia, protected by a phalanx of agents, waited with bated breath. Suddenly, a shout came from inside the building, followed by the sound of breaking glass. A figure burst from a side door, running for the tree line. Even at a distance, Cauã recognized João. "Stop!" Rodriguez bellowed. "Federal police!" But João kept running. Shots rang out, and João stumbled, falling to the ground. As agents rushed to secure him, Cauã and Livia sprinted towards the building. "Bianca! Lorena!" Livia called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. For a heart-stopping moment, there was only silence. Then a small voice called back, "Mama! Papa!" From behind a pile of old machinery, two small figures emerged. Bianca and Lorena, dirty and frightened but alive, ran towards their parents. Cauã fell to his knees, ignoring the pain in his shoulder as he gathered his daughters into his arms. Livia joined the embrace, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now," Cauã murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "It's over. You're safe." As the family clung to each other, the first real rays of sunlight broke through the mill's broken windows, illuminating the scene. It was a moment of pure relief, of love triumphing over fear. But even as Cauã reveled in the joy of holding his family, he knew that their ordeal wasn't truly over. João was in custody, but there were still questions to be answered, wounds to be healed. The final chapter of their story was yet to be written, and Cauã was determined to see it through to the end. The weeks following the rescue of Bianca and Lorena passed in a whirlwind of debriefings, medical checkups, and intense therapy sessions. The girls, while physically unharmed, bore emotional scars from their ordeal. Nightmares were common, and they were reluctant to let either Cauã or Livia out of their sight for long. It was a crisp autumn morning, when Kawa found himself standing in front of the imposing Mendez Corporation building once again. This time, however, he wasn't here as the prodigal son or the whistleblower. Today he was here to begin the monumental task of rebuilding. "Are you ready for this?" Livia asked, squeezing his hand supportively. Kawan took a deep breath, looking down at their intertwined fingers. The simple gold band on Livia's ring finger caught the morning light, a symbol of the quiet, intimate wedding ceremony they had held just days ago, surrounded only by their closest friends and family. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, managing a small smile. They made their way to the executive floor where a team of forensic accountants, lawyers, and trusted employees were waiting. The task ahead was daunting, to root out every last vestige of corruption while salvaging the legitimate parts of the business and the jobs of innocent employees. As the meeting began, Kawa couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this point. The pain, the fear, the betrayals, but also the love, the courage, and the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. His thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Clara entered, a tablet in hand and a serious expression on her face. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's something you need to see." She handed Kawan the tablet, which displayed a live news feed. His breath caught as he saw the headline, "João Costa found dead in prison cell, apparent suicide." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. João had been their last link to understanding the full scope of the conspiracy, and now he was gone, taking his secrets with him. Kawa felt a mix of emotions, anger, frustration, but also a strange sense of relief. With João's passing, a chapter had truly closed. "Mr. Mendez?" one of the lawyers prompted gently. "Should we continue?" Kawan looked up, meeting the expectant gazes of those around the table. He nodded, squaring his shoulders. "Yes, let's continue. We have a lot of work to do." The days that followed were long and challenging. Kawa threw himself into the task of reforming Mendez Corporation, implementing stringent anti-corruption measures, and fostering a culture of transparency. Livia, drawing on her experiences and compassion, started a foundation to support victims of corruption and their families. It was nearly a month later when Kawa received an unexpected visitor in his office. Agent Ribeiro entered, looking slightly out of place in the corporate setting. "Mr. Mendez," she greeted, taking a seat across from him. "I thought you'd like to know, we've concluded our investigation into João's activities." Kawan leaned forward, his interest piqued. "And?" Ribeiro's expression was grim. "It appears he was working for a shadow organization, one that had its tentacles in various corrupt enterprises across South America. Your uncle's operation was just one part of a much larger network." The news sent a chill down Kawa's spine. Are we still in danger?" Ribeiro shook her head. "The evidence you provided, combined with Evaristo's cooperation, has allowed us to dismantle a significant portion of their operations. But," she added, her tone cautionary, "there are always those who will seek to exploit power and wealth. Your work here, creating a truly ethical corporation, is more important than ever." As Ribeiro left, Kawa stood by the window, looking out over the São Paulo skyline. The city seemed different now, as if he was seeing it with new eyes. There was still corruption, still injustice, but there was also hope. Hope for a better future, one that he and Livia were actively working to create. His phone buzzed with a message from Livia. "Don't forget, school play at 3, the girls are excited to see you." Kawa smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. This was what truly mattered, not the power, not the money, but the love of his family and the chance to make a real difference in the world. As he gathered his things to leave for the school, Kawa paused by his desk. There in a simple frame was a photo taken just last week. Kawa, Livia, Bianca and Lorena, all laughing as they played in the park. It was a moment of pure joy, one that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Kawa touched the photo gently, a silent promise passing through his mind. He would never take this happiness for granted. He would work every day to be worthy of the love and trust his family had placed in him. As he left the office, nodding goodbye to Clara, Kawa felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead would not be easy. There would always be challenges, always be those who sought to exploit others for their own gain. But he was no longer facing these challenges alone. With Livia by his side, with the love of his daughters to guide him, and with the support of those who had stood by them through the darkest times, Kawan knew that they could face whatever the future held. As he stepped out into the bright São Paulo afternoon, Kawan took a deep breath, savoring the moment. The past could not be changed, but the future was full of possibility. And for the first time in years, Kawan Mendes was truly excited to see what that future would bring. The end of one chapter had come, but the story of the Mendes family, a story of love, redemption, and the power of truth, was far from over. It was in many ways just beginning.